Florence Ballard's legal case against Motown Records is an intense chapter in the history of the music industry, shedding light on the struggles faced by artists behind the scenes. In the excerpts of her legal case, Ballard's story is framed as a battle for justice and recognition. It highlights her pivotal role in founding the Supremes, one of the most successful female vocal groups in history, and her subsequent marginalization and financial struggles after being ousted from the group. The legal case underscores the complexities of her relationship with Motown and Berry Gordy, revealing allegations of financial mismanagement and exploitation. Ballard's fight for her rights is portrayed not just as a personal struggle, but as a broader commentary on the treatment of artists in the music industry as a whole, particularly those who contributed significantly to the success of their groups but were left without financial security they deserved. And this narrative really sets the stage for a deeper exploration of the legal and personal battles that Ballard faced, providing a critical lens on the often glamorized history of Motown and its artists. Florence Ballard's association with Berry Gordy Jr. began in 1960 when she was just 17 years old. At this young age, she was recognized for her exceptional vocal talent, which led to her involvement with Gordy, who was the president of Motown Records and its associated corporations. This relationship marked the beginning of her professional journey in the music industry. On January 15, 1961, Ballard, still a minor at the time, signed her first recording agreement with Motown Records in Detroit. This agreement was a significant milestone in her career, but it was marred by several issues. Notably, Ballard was not provided with a copy of the agreement, which meant she had no personal record of the terms and conditions she had agreed to. Additionally, she was not represented by an attorney of her choice during the signing process. This lack of legal representation and transparency left her vulnerable to potential exploitation and financial mismanagement. The absence of legal counsel and a personal copy of the contract highlights the power imbalance between young artists and record labels at the time. It underscores the challenges Ballard faced in navigating the music industry, where artists often had little control over their careers and financial futures. This situation set the stage for the legal battles and personal struggles that Ballard would later endure, as she sought to reclaim her rights and secure the recognition and compensation she deserved for her contributions to the Supremes and Motown's success. At the time Florence Ballard signed the agreements, Berry Gordy assured her that she need not worry about the specifics of the contracts. He promised to take care of all aspects of her career and personal life, including her financial, professional, business, and personal affairs. Gordy's assurances were meant to instill confidence in Ballard, suggesting that she could trust him to manage her interests effectively. Relying on Gordy's representations, Ballard did not demand copies of the agreements. She placed complete faith and trust in Gordy and his representatives, allowing them to handle and manage her financial, business, and personal affairs, as well as her personal matters and singing career. This trust was rooted in the belief that Gordy would act in her best interest, and given his position as a mentor and leader within Motown. However, this reliance on Gordy's promises left Ballard vulnerable. Without access to the agreements or independent legal advice, she had no way to verify the terms or ensure that her rights were protected. This situation underscores the power dynamics at play, where young artists like Ballard were often dependent on the goodwill and integrity of industry executives. It also highlights the broader issues of artist exploitation and the need for greater transparency and legal safeguards in the music industry. Throughout the duration of her recording and management agreements with Motown and international management, Florence Ballard was never fully informed about the nature, amount, or extent of the compensation she would entitled to receive. Despite her status as an internationally renowned female vocalist and entertainer, none of the defendants, Berry Gordy Jr., Motown, or international management, provided her with necessary details regarding her rightful earnings. Ballard's lack of knowledge about her compensation was not due to her own negligence, but rather the absence of proper counseling, advice, or information for the defendants. She relied entirely on the good faith, trusting that they would manage her affairs and ensure she would receive all monies and compensation she was due. This trust was based on the assurances given by Berry Gordy Jr. and the belief that the defendants would act in her best interest. The defendants were fully aware of Ballard's complete reliance and trust in them. They knew she depended on them to handle her financial and professional matters appropriately. However, this trust was misplaced, as Ballard was not adequately informed or compensated for her contributions and services as a performer. Under the terms of the agreement, international management, then known as Berry Gordy Jr. Enterprises, Inc., was entrusted with the responsibility of negotiating all contracts on behalf of Florence Ballard. This included exerting their utmost efforts, skills, and power to represent her across all branches of the entertainment industry. The agreement stipulated that international management was to act in Ballard's best interests, ensuring that every aspect of her career was managed with the highest level of dedication and expertise. Specifically, the agreement required international management to use its best efforts to advise Ballard on all phases of her career. This encompassed a wide range of responsibilities, including selection of engagements, helping Ballard choose the most beneficial and strategic performance opportunities, choice of material, guiding her in selecting songs and other performance materials that would best showcase her talents and appeal to her audience, public relations, managing her public image and interactions with the media to enhance her reputation and career prospects, financial affairs, overseeing her financial matters to ensure she was properly compensated and her earnings were managed effectively, and negotiating of agreements, handling all negotiations related to contracts and agreements that would impact her career, ensuring that the terms were favorable and protected her interests. Despite these extensive responsibilities outlined in the agreement, Ballard's experience suggested that international management did not fulfill these obligations to the extent required. The lack of transparency and proper management of her affairs led to significant financial and professional challenges for Ballard, highlighting the disparity between the contractual promises and the reality of her situation. From the outset of her association with Berry Gordy Jr. and Motown, Florence Ballard dedicated herself wholeheartedly to her performances. Her talent and charisma quickly garnered widespread popularity and international acclaim. As a member of the Supremes, Ballard's career soared, and she became a celebrated figure in the music industry. During her time with the Supremes, Ballard performed at some of the most prestigious venues, including exclusive nightclubs, supper clubs, and television programs. Her engagement spanned across the United States and extended to international stages, earning her substantial amounts of money. These performances not only solidified the Supremes' status as a leading act, but also showcased Ballard's exceptional vocal abilities to a global audience. Throughout this period, Berry Gordy played a pivotal role in managing the Supremes. He functioned as their personal manager, representative, and advisor, overseeing all aspects of their career. Specifically, Gordy was responsible for handling Ballard's financial affairs, ensuring that her earnings and financial interests were managed properly, and more. This role placed a significant amount of trust and responsibility on Gordy, as Ballard relied on him to safeguard her financial well-being. However, despite the substantial earnings and the high-profile nature of her performances, Ballard's financial struggles later in life suggest that the management of her finances may not have been as effective or transparent as it should have been. Throughout her times with the Supremes, up to and including February 1968, Florence Ballard placed immense trust in Berry Gordy in his roles as her personal manager, representative, advisor, and as president of Motown and International Management, assured Ballard that he was her trusted friend and protector of her career. He promised to manage, promote, develop, and safeguard her professional interests, ensuring she received all due compensation from her performances and television appearances. Gordy also committed to handling all royalties and earnings from merchandising rights and record sales, claiming that these funds were being set aside in a separate account and trust for Ballard's benefit. He further assured her that he would make wise and prudent investments on her behalf, diligently taking all necessary steps to protect and enhance her rights and career. Ballard relied completely on these representations, trusting Gordy both as a friend and in his professional capacity. She believed that he was managing her financial and professional affairs with her best interests at heart. However, despite these assurances, from 1960 to February 1968, Ballard was never informed by Gordy or any of the defendants about the exact amount of compensation she was entitled to receive. This lack of transparency and information left her unaware of her rightful earnings and financial status. In 1966, the Supremes earned over $1 million from their personal appearances at various public entertainment venues. These substantial earnings were managed, collected, and held in trust by International Management and Berry Gordy. Gordy handled these funds in multiple capacities, as an individual, as the president of International Management, and as the personal manager, advisor, and representation of the Supremes. In 1967, the Supremes secured bookings for engagements with guaranteed earnings exceeding $1,666,633.94 from personal appearances. This impressive sum reflected their immense popularity and the high demand for their performances at the time. During this year, they also obtained advanced bookings for future engagements at public entertainment facilities, ensuring a steady stream of income and continued visibility in the entertainment industry. Despite these significant earnings, the management and distribution of these funds were not transparent to Ballard. She relied on Gordy and International Management to handle her financial affairs, trusting that they would ensure she received her rightful share. Between 1966 and 1968, International Management entered into numerous contractual agreements on behalf of the Supremes and Florence Ballard. Despite these agreements being crucial to her career, Ballard never received copies of them, while International Management retained all documentation. When Ballard entered the music industry, she lacked the knowledge and experience in the business aspects of the entertainment world, particularly the record industry. During this period, Diana Ross presented herself as a partner to Ballard, suggesting a close professional relationship with the Supremes. However, in late 1967 and on various occasions thereafter, a conspiracy emerged among the defendants, their agents, and servants. They secretly and maliciously plotted to oust Ballard from the Supremes. This betrayal by those she trusted and relied on marked a significant turning point in her career, leading to her eventual departure from the group. This narrative paints a vivid picture of the challenges Ballard faced, highlighting the systemic issues and exploitation and mismanagement in the music industry. It also underscores the personal and professional betrayals that compounded her struggles, ultimately leading to her legal battle for justice and recognition. In the latter part of 1967, Florence Ballard began to sense a shift in the dynamics within the Supremes. The once harmonious relationship among the group members started to deteriorate, and Ballard found herself increasingly subjected to unjustified and unwarranted criticisms from Diana Ross and Berry Gordy. They frequently targeted her professional performances as a vocalist, undermining her confidence and position within the group. Berry Gordy repeatedly told Ballard that her singing was subpar and that her performances were negatively impacting the overall quality of the Supreme shows. This criticism culminated during a performance in Las Vegas, Nevada, where Gordy informed Ballard that she could not perform with the group because she was not singing well. These assertions were part of a broader, covert effort by Gordy and Ross to remove Ballard from the Supremes. Behind the scenes, Gordy and Ross were conspiring to oust Ballard and replace her with Sydney Birdsong. Despite their outward claims that Ballard's performances were detrimental to the group, these representations were false and fraudulent. Gordy and Ross knew that their criticisms were baseless, yet they continued to undermine Ballard to facilitate her removal. Throughout this period, Ballard had valid and binding contracts with Motown and international management regarding her role in the Supremes. However, the secretive and malicious actions of Gordy and Ross, along with their agents, aimed to wrongfully expel her from the group. This betrayal was particularly devastating, given Ballard's reliance on their assurances and her belief in their support. From 1964 to 1967, the Supremes achieved unprecedented success, becoming the top female group in the United States and beyond. Their records sold at phenomenal rates, cementing their place in the music industry. Despite this success, Ballard's personal and professional struggles highlight the darker side of the music industry, where internal politics and power plays often overshadow the achievements of individual artists. In 1967, the Supremes were achieving remarkable commercial success, selling over 750,000 phonograph records each month. Despite this phenomenal rate of sales, Florence Ballard remained unaware of the exact amount of money and royalties she was entitled to. While Ballard was kept in the dark, Berry Gordy, Motown, and international management, along with their agents, were fully aware of the substantial earnings she was due, including future royalties and other forms of income. From 1964 to 1967, the Supremes not only sold records at an extraordinary pace, but also built significant goodwill, with their brand valued at well over $1 million. However, in a calculated move to oust Ballard from the group, the defendants and their agents deliberately concealed the extent of her rightful earnings and personal properties. They purposely hid the vast amounts of money she was entitled to from record sales and other sources, furthering their conspiracy to remove her from the Supremes. The defendants, well-versed in the music and record management business, exploited Ballard's inexperience and lack of knowledge about the industry's financial aspects. They knew she relied on their representation and used this trust to manipulate her. In July 1967, as part of their scheme, they dispatched Michael Rothschild from New York City to Detroit. Rothschild's mission was to persuade Ballard to sign documents that would facilitate her removal from the group. Upon arriving in Detroit, Rothschild checked into the Northern Inn and summoned Ballard to meet with him. This meeting was a critical step in the defendants' plan to oust her from the Supremes, further illustrating the lengths they went to in order to achieve their goal. On July 28, 1967, Florence Ballard met with Michael Rothschild at Northern Inn in Detroit. During this meeting, Rothschild falsely claimed that Ballard was not entitled to any present or future monies from Berry Gordy, international management, Diana Ross, or Motown. He further asserted that her performances were negatively impacting the Supremes' popularity and that it would be in everyone's best interest for her to allow the defendants to remove her from the group. To persuade her, Rothschild offered Ballard $2,500 per year for 6 years, framing it as a benevolent gesture since, according to him, the defendants had no financial obligations to her. Rothschild's representations were fraudulent, and he knew that Ballard had no access to her own money, which was controlled exclusively by the defendants. She was merely receiving a meager allowance from them. Under these false pretenses, Ballard was induced to sign the document that facilitated her removal from the Supremes. After signing, Ballard retained an attorney who contacted the defendants regarding the supplemental agreement. From August 1967 to February 1968, negotiations took place to set aside the agreement and replace it with another. However, during this period, the defendants successfully concealed their conspiracy to oust Ballard from her and her attorney. On February 22, 1968, the defendants completed their plan by having Ballard sign a general release agreement, officially removing her from the Supremes and compensating her with inadequate sums of money. Throughout this conspiracy, the defendants repeatedly told Ballard that her performances were subpar and adversely affecting the group's success. They knew these claims were false, but they used them to justify their actions. Florence Ballard's reliance on the representations made by Berry Gordy and others was a key factor in their conspiracy to oust her from the group. She trusted their assurances, which were intended to mislead her and facilitate her removal from the group. It wasn't until the latter part of 1968 that Ballard began to uncover the true nature of this malicious conspiracy. This conspiracy not only violated the laws of the state of Michigan, but also caused irreparable damage to Ballard and the public. As a result of the efforts to destroy her professional career, Ballard suffered significant damages. This included harm to her non-entertainment and business interests, her ability to earn fees from product endorsements and publicity appearances, and her career as a female vocalist. The total damages exceeded $1.5 million. On several occasions, Motown and its agents failed to promote and support Ballard's career to the same extent as they did for Diana Ross. they consistently neglected to account for and pay the monies owed to Ballard under her recording agreement. Additionally, Motown refused to allow Ballard to inspect and audit their books and records, which pertained to the monies she was entitled to receiving. They also failed to provide proper accounting statements. From 1964 onwards, Motown received over $10 million from the sales of tapes and other cartridges during the Supremes and Ballard's performances. However, they rendered false and fraudulent accounts to Ballard, grossly understating the royalties due to her. Furthermore, Motown excessively overcharged her for costs related to arrangement, copying, accompaniments, and other expenses associated with her recordings. They secretly concealed the true cost and charges that should have been allocated to her. Defendant Motown fraudulently and falsely and excessively offset said costs referred to hereof in the cause of action and wrongly offset said costs against royalties, earnings, and other monies properly due and belonging to Ms. Ballard. During the same period of time, Motown and Ms. Ballard agreed that she was to receive certain compensations for making television and radio commercials. Motown failed to pay unto Ballard the proper sums of monies that she was entitled to receiving. At the time of the execution of said agreement, and during all of the time of its existence up to and including the time of filing this complaint, Motown agreed to grant foreign licenses for the purpose of manufacturing and selling phonograph records embodying the performances of Ms. Ballard. Motown's foreign licenses were inadequate in that, among other things, they failed to properly and adequately manufacture, distribute, market, exploit, and sell phonograph records which embodied Ms. Ballard's performances. The licenses selected by Motown were done in grossly negligent manners. Motown should have and would have realized that said foreign licenses were deficient and inadequate in capabilities to sufficiently manufacture, market, exploit, and sell said phonograph records. Motown should have and could have known about the deficiencies of said foreign licenses if they had properly investigated the foreign licenses before entering said agreements with them. As a result, Motown's lack of diligence and care, Ms. Ballard has lost vast and substantial amounts of money and loss of rights. Motown further breached terms of said contract by engaging in the conspiracy to oust Ms. Ballard from the Supremes, as referred to count 1 of this complaint. Motown breached the terms and conditions of said agreement and violated their duties to Ms. Ballard by engaging in her conspiracy to fraudulently defraud Ms. Ballard of the vast sums of money she was entitled to receiving. As a result, breach of express provisions of said agreement, breach of fiduciary and special relationships, defendant Motown has succeeded in causing irreparable damage to Ms. Ballard and the public. As a consequence of the acts and or omissions of the part of the defendants regarding their obligations under said agreement, Ms. Ballard has suffered and will suffer damages to her non-entertainment business interests, damaging to her ability to receive fees and benefits from the product endorsements and publicity appearances, and other damages in excess of $2 million. And at the time, from and after the effective date of August 10, 1964, the date of the agreement between Ms. Ballard and Defendant International, and continuously throughout the entire terms thereof up to and including the date of the filing of this complaint, Ms. Ballard fully and faithfully performed her obligations. At the time that Defendant International was acting in the capacity of Ms. Ballard's personal representative, agent, advisor, business, and financial advisor as a business manager as it related to the total aspect of her professional career and personal affairs, Berry Gordy, in his capacities as president of Motown, the president of International, in his individual capacity, was acting as Ms. Ballard's personal manager. This said management agreement was drafted by the Defendant International and the attorneys without discussion or consultation with Ms. Ballard or any attorney representing her interests. The said management agreement gave Defendant International almost complete and total control and direction over Ms. Ballard as it related to her professional career. Among other things, International was to be her exclusive manager, representative, advisor, agent, and as it related to all phases of her professional and entertainment career. And generally, Defendant International was to exert itself to the best of its endeavors and to the utmost of its skill, power, and ability, and to represent Ms. Ballard in all branches of the entertainment field. By the terms of the said agreement, and by virtue of the fact that the defendant Berry Gordy, in his many roles and capacities as Ms. Ballard's personal manager and the president of International and controlling stockholder of International, Defendant International enjoyed and occupied a special fiduciary relationship with Ms. Ballard. By this reason of special confidence and fiduciary relationship, it was the duty and obligation of Defendant International, its respective officers, attorneys, agents, accountants, and servants to exercise the utmost good faith, trust, and care in the handling and managing of Ms. Ballard's financial and business affairs and her professional career. Defendant International had fiduciary duties to Ms. Ballard to exercise the utmost candor, fidelity, and honesty in handling all of her affairs, to observe the highest and strictest form of integrity pertaining to Ms. Ballard, and to refrain from abusing such confidence and fiduciary relationship and from obtaining any advantage to itself or for the benefit of others at the expense of Ms. Ballard. During the terms of said agreement, Defendant International, on the diverse occasions and continually up to and including the date of this complaint, intentionally, maliciously, and subversively failed to treat Miss Ballard's career in the same manner consistent with Defendant Diana Ross's career. Defendant International failed to promote the use of its best efforts in furtherance of Miss Ballard's career as it did with Defendant Diana Ross's career. Defendant International wrongfully breached their fiduciary duties in representing Defendant Diana Ross to the detriment and the harm of Miss Ballard, and in representing its own interest contrary to the best interests of Miss Ballard. Defendant International was under obligation to said agreement to use its best efforts to promote Miss Ballard's career and to obtain personal engagements for her. Defendant International, in breaching its obligations as Miss Ballard's exclusive business manager and personal representative, refused, failed, and neglected to obtain personal engagements for Miss Ballard to exploit her talents. Defendant International was obliged to use its best efforts to advise Miss Ballard in connection with all phases of her career and to counsel her in connection with the selection of engagements, public relations, financial affairs, and in its negotiations of all agreements affecting Miss Ballard's career. By reason of the special confidence and fiduciary relationship, it was the duty and obligation of Defendant International, along with its respective officers, attorneys, agents, accountants, and servants, to exercise the utmost good faith, trust, and care in handling and managing Miss Ballard's financial and business affairs, as well as her professional career. They were required to observe the highest and strictest form of integrity in all matters pertaining to Miss Ballard and to refrain from abusing such confidence in fiduciary relationship. They were also obligated to avoid obtaining any advantage for themselves for the benefit of others at the expense of Miss Ballard. Defendant International's relationship with Defendant Motown conflicted with the expressed obligations that Defendant International owed to Miss Ballard. Defendant International operated in its own self-interest and in the interest of Defendant Motown to the detriment of Miss Ballard. During all of the aforementioned times, obtaining large and vast sums of money for its own economic interests and for Defendant Motown in direct violation of many and various fiduciary obligations owed to Miss Ballard. Berry Gordy Jr. and Diana Ross falsely and fraudulently represented and stated to Miss Ballard's attorney for the purposes of including Miss Ballard to execute said purported releases that International had accounted to her for all the sums due to and become due to her as an artist on account of personal appearances from the beginning of the term of the original management agreement and all subsequent agreements to the date of the purported release agreement, except in the sum of $20,195.06. All items of income, items of expense, and various items of every other description were correct in every aspect, and she had received complete and accurate accounts of royalties saving pursuant to said management agreement. But that was a lie. that was a lie. That was a huge lie. At the said time, International offered and agreed to pay Miss Ballard a total of $20,195.06 for her various rights of assets, but they knew that she was entitled to vast sums of money and earnings far in excess of the offered sum. However, International, along with Berry Gordy, Michael Roshkind, Ralph Seltzer, and Diana Ross, concealed these facts from Miss Ballard. They were fully aware that Miss Ballard and her attorney did not know the extent of the value of her various rights and would rely upon their representations. At the time that defendants, their servants, and agents made these false and fraudulent misrepresentations, the value of Miss Ballard's various rights and assets to the various management contracts was in excess of $1 million. They represented to Miss Ballard's attorney that all of her various rights pursuant to the recording agreement were only worth $134,804.94, and they had full knowledge that the sum offered to Miss Ballard was grossly inadequate compared to the vast amounts of money she was entitled to receiving. They also knew that Miss Ballard and her attorney would rely upon their representations. The trade name The Supremes initially held no commercial value. However, from 1961 to 1968, the name gained significant commercial value and goodwill due to the collective efforts of Ross, Wilson, and Ballard. During this period, Ross, Wilson, and Ballard were partners, sharing equally in profits and losses while performing as entertainers under the group name The Supremes. The trade name also served as the business name for Ross, Wilson, and Ballard, with their bank accounts held in the name of The Supremes. On or about February 22, 1968, Motown International, Berry Gordy Jr., and Diana Ross, along with their agents, falsely and fraudulently represented to Miss Ballard in a purported release agreement that the name Supremes was properly owned by Motown and not Ross, Wilson, and Ballard, that Miss Ballard had no rights, title, or interest in the name Supremes, and that Miss Ballard never had any interest in the ownership of the name Supremes. Since the formation of the partnership, Ross and Wilson have continued to operate under the name of the Supremes. Since February 22, 1968, Ross and Wilson have appropriated for their own use of the receipts and proceeds from the partnership business, including the continued use and exploitation of the partnership name and assets, receiving sums of money far exceeding their entitled shares. The combined skills of Miss Ballard, Diana Ross, and Mary Wilson under the name Supremes resulted in substantial financial gains, benefits, and prestige for the group, thereby creating valuable goodwill associated with the trade name. Defendant Motown International and Berry Gordy permitted others to use and perform under the name Supremes. The individuals who performed under this trade name were defendants Sidney Birdsong and Jean Terrell. Motown International, Berry Gordy, Sidney Birdsong, and Terrell were caused and continue to cause irreparable harm to Miss Ballard's rights, title, ownership, and interest in the trade name The Supremes. Unfortunately, the court ruled in favor of Motown, leaving Ballard without the financial compensation she had hoped for. This legal defeat was a significant blow to her both emotionally and financially. Shortly after the court case, Ballard's personal life began to unravel. She and her husband, Thomas Chapman, separated due to ongoing domestic disputes. This separation added to her emotional distress, and soon after, her home was foreclosed. The loss of her home marked a turning point, plunging her into poverty and deepened into her depression. Struggling to cope with these challenges, Ballard turned to alcohol, which further isolated her from the public and her former life as a celebrated singer. In 1972, seeking support, she moved in with her sister, Maxine. This move provided her with some stability, but her struggles were far from over. In 1974, a glimmer of hope appeared when Mary Wilson invited Ballard to join the Supremes on stage at Magic Mountain. The lineup at that time included Sidney Birdsong and Sherry Payne. Although Ballard agreed to participate, she only played the tambourine and did not sing. She confided in Wilson that she no longer had the ambition to sing, indicating how deeply her experiences had affected her. Later that year, Ballard's financial struggles became public knowledge when the news of her welfare application leaked to the press. This exposure brought her plight into the public eye, highlighting the stark contrast between her past fame and her current hardships. Seeking to turn her life around, Ballard entered Henry Ford Hospital for rehabilitation treatment. After 6 weeks of intense care, she began to show signs of recovery. This period marked a slow but hopeful journey towards regaining her health and stability. Despite these efforts, Ballard's life remained challenging, and she continued to face difficulties in her personal and professional life. Her story is a poignant reminder of the complexities and struggle that can accompany fame and the resilience required to navigate such hardships. In early 1975, Florence Ballard received a financial settlement from her former attorney's insurance company. This settlement provided her with the means to purchase a new home on Shaftesbury Avenue, offering her a fresh start and a sense of stability that had been missing from her life for years. This financial boost reignited her passion for music and inspired her to return to the stage. Additionally, the newfound stability helped her reconcile with her husband, Thomas Chapman, marking a hopeful turn in her personal life. Ballard's comeback to the music scene was marked by her first concert performance in over 5 years, held at the Henry and Edsel Ford Auditorium in Detroit on June 25, 1975. This event was part of a benefit concert for the Joan Little Defense League, an organization supporting the legal defense of Joan Little, a young African-American woman accused of killing a white prison guard in self-defense. Ballard's performance was backed by the female rock group The Deadly Nightshade, adding a unique and powerful dynamic to her return. The concert was a significant moment for Ballard, symbolizing her resilience and determination to overcome the hardships she had faced. Her performance was well received, and it marked the beginning of a new chapter in her life. Following the concert, Ballard began to attract media attention. With numerous interview requests coming her way, Jet magazine was among the first to cover her story, highlighting her recovery and return to music industry. This media coverage helped to reestablish her presence in the public eye and provided a platform for her to share her journey of recovery and resilience. On February 21, 1976, Florence Ballard was admitted to Mount Carmel Mercy Hospital, experiencing numbness in her extremities. Despite medical efforts, she tragically passed away at 10:05 a.m. the following morning due to cardiac arrest. The cause was identified as a coronary thrombosis, a blood clot in one of her coronary arteries. Ballard's untimely death at the age of 32 marked a sorrowful end to the life of a woman who had once been a shining star in the music world. Following her death, Ballard was laid to rest at Detroit Memorial Park Cemetery in Warren, Michigan. Her burial site initially featured a basic gravestone, a modest marker for someone who had made such a significant impact in the music industry. Decades later, on June 30th, 2021, a proper memorial headstone was finally placed at Florence Ballard's gravesite in honor of what would have been her birthday. This new headstone was a long overdue tribute to her legacy, recognizing her contributions to music and her enduring influence. The dedication of this headstone served as a poignant reminder of Ballard's talent and the challenges she faced throughout her life. It also provided a place for fans and loved ones to pay their respects and celebrate her memory. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.